This microtalk is part of a mini-series on greenwashing. We encourage you to watch the entire mini-series on our blog. Thank you. Regulatory scrutiny, whether or not it results in fines or sanctions for a company, can, of course, ultimately result in negative press and reputational damage for companies. There are too many examples to go through here, but some examples in the financial sector of reputational risk have included negative press surrounding greenwashing allegations that asset managers have overstated the sustainable related products in their funds or applied monies invested in so-called green funds to invest in the fossil fuel industry, investor claims to regulators that a company's prospectus fails to adequately disclose climate risk factors associated with its activities, investor complaints to regulators that statements in a prospectus that a company and its securities were sustainable failed to disclose the wider picture of the company and its group, namely that the company was part of a group that was heavily invested in the fossil fuel industry. So it's important to note the complaints made to date have not only been made against issuers of relevant securities, but also against the underwriting banks that offered the securities and the regulators tasked with improving the regulated relevant prospectuses. This highlights just how many participants in the market can potentially suffer reputational risk when greenwashing claims are made. What's more, these reputational risks are proven on occasion to be unjustified and fall far below the standards of evidence that would be required of a claimant to bring the matters at hand to a successful litigation outcome. Reputational risk is so important to understand for this very reason, as the standards required to bring a company's reputation into disrepute in the public eye is not necessarily the same standard as to bring successful action in a court. In addition to regulatory and reputational risk, civil litigation against organizations accused of greenwashing is becoming increasingly common. This risk can broadly be attributed to a few key factors. Firstly, though the ESG regulatory reporting landscape is developing at pace, organizations that are subject to regulatory scrutiny and within the scope of these regimes more often than not face data obstacles in meeting their disclosure requirements. This is resulting in exposures for organizations, with more avenues for potential litigants to hold organizations to account. Secondly, there is a broader range of claimants in ESG-related matters. The increased availability of litigation funding and the ability of not-for-profit organizations to gain access to grants and donations has indeed deepened the pockets of potential litigants. Thirdly, stakeholders tend also to have different motivations and barometers for what constitutes a successful outcome of litigation. They may not be after material recompense at all, but their core aim from litigation and proceedings may be to create negative publicity for an organization to deter consumers and investors from the organization, perhaps ultimately with the goal of changing the organization's behavior and conduct. Such claims to date have covered specific areas. For example, organizations facing claims that their GHG or greenhouse gas reduction plans are not sufficiently clear or credible, financial institutions facing claims relating to the inadequacy of their corporate sustainability disclosures, their failures to prevent environmental damage under duties of care recently introduced into their domestic laws, or their failure to comply with recently developed human rights and environmental due diligence obligations. I would like to thank you for joining me, and if you would like to know more, there is a lot more detail on our free writings and perspectives blog, as well as on our Eye on ESG blog. All the very best. Thank you.